Ladies and gentlemen, we'll get the meeting started. Welcome to this meeting of the North Somerset Council Executive. We'll start the meeting with addresses by members of the public. So we've got two addresses this afternoon. So up first is David Sims. So Mr. Sims, if you'd like to kick us off, thank you.
The proposed parking charges in Hill Road will negatively impact the area. Its range of specialist independent shops and restaurants need people to browse and spend more time than a 30 minutes pop into the spa shop. The scrutiny panel I attended demonstrated its concern about the impact of the proposals on businesses and the lack of data and evidence supporting the introduction of on-street car parking charges in Hill Road. It even prompted the chair to comment, "Anecdotes are just not good enough." The rationale for including Hill Road as the only shopping area with on-street charges in this proposal remains not clear. Like the scrutiny panel, indeed like many councillors, I have asked NSC officers and executive members for evidence that supports the introduction of on-street parking in Hill Road. And all anybody has got is, when on-street charges came to Weston, all was fine. Or, the council was of the view that on-street charges in Hill Road would have traffic management benefits as well as increasing turnover to support businesses. And in the scrutiny panel meeting itself, the officer could not provide any meaningful data other than saying there were some drive-bys. Decisions about street parking charges must be supported by traffic management evidence and a clear rationale to serve the best interests of the community. This is not the case for the Clevedon community, and I urge the executive to recognise the lack of specific data and evidence regarding Hill Road and do what the scrutiny panel urged them to do: put in place mitigations to address the negative impacts that the current proposal will have. The executive member for placemaking and economy has said, quote, "NSC will not monitor parking in Hill Road without a paid-for system in place." This position is not justified and does not take into account the interests of the Hill Road businesses that the scrutiny panel recommendation sought to protect. I am sure that parking enforcement occurs in many places, e.g. World High Street, within North Somerset, without parking charges being present. So why is Hill Road Clevedon being unfairly singled out in this manner? I offer the executive two ideas for mitigation. Firstly, retain the 2 hours free parking, but bring in the charging system for longer periods. This will allow the browsing experience in Hill Road to continue and not risk many potential customers, including those sitting in this room, to regrettably drive to Cribbs Causeway. Secondly, to retain 2 hours free parking, but to enforce it properly. Enforcement obviously costs money, so imaginative ways of funding this should be sought, including maybe redirection of bid levies, or perhaps direct support from Clevedon Town Council. Please don't risk making Hill Road, like many other places you see every day, into a deserted street full of empty shops and empty cafes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. You'll know that the response to the scrutiny panel discussion on parking charges is on the agenda later in the meeting, and I know Councillor Caniford, as lead member, will have listened carefully to what you had to say. Okay, and our second speaker is Mr. Ben Moss. So, Mr. Moss, if you'd like to go.
Thank you very much, councillors. I'm here to talk today about Bristol Airport Limited, specifically in relation to the climate and nature emergency, although I feel that your roles as the executive is that you could look at the current master plan that they have and look at each part of the North Somerset Council's missions, be it environment or health, or fairness, and you could look at what they are suggesting and scrutinise what they are saying. But I'm particularly wanting to draw attention to the assumptions that they are presenting within their master plan. The master plan is open to consultation. We all well know that that will be going to a planning application, but I'm not talking about the planning application. I'm talking about a narrative that is being shared with the public that is misinformed at best and utterly misleading at worst. And I believe that the executive has a responsibility to hold the airport to account about its assumptions and what it is sharing. There is misinformation in there about the impact on the economy, on jobs, but in particular the impact on the nature and climate emergency is around the assumption of the increase of passenger numbers from 10 million per year to 15 million per year. We had at COP29 and the G20 meetings recently, we had the UK government both confirm their commitment to Paris 2015 to 1.5 degrees centigrade, raising of temperatures above pre-industrial average. This year we've already been reaching that, unfortunately. However, that commitment is there. What this entails is going to be a continued pressure on the aviation industry. We've already seen that EasyJet and Ryanair, due to the £1 surcharges being put on them, is that they are cutting flights. EasyJet is a significant player at Bristol Airport, and yet there is no evidence shared about the dropping of numbers. I'm asking you as the committee to scrutinise what they are talking about and feed back to them as a significant player in the local area. They are, the information that they're sharing is wrong at best, and when there is a consultation going on where the public are coming to participate, if they see the figures as written and correct, they will not step in and respond in a way that will hold the airport to account. There's too much information suggested as business as usual, where in fact there has to be drastic change. Thank you. I have a printout here that I'd like to share with the council. I'll just pass it to someone if they could be passed down. I have 9 of them here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moss. We'll certainly read the information that you're providing and take those questions into account, and I'll ask the relevant executive member to come back to you after the meeting in terms of what action we might be able to take. Thank you very much to both speakers for attending today. Okay, so the second item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I can see that all colleagues are present, so there are none. Does anyone under item 3 have any disclosable pecuniary interests that they wish to declare? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item 4 is to approve the minutes of the last meeting on the 16th of October as correct. Everyone happy to support that? Yep, thank you. So those are approved. I will sign them off. Non-executive councillors' addresses, item 5, there are none. Item 6, matters referred that are not already on the agenda, there are none. Item 7, the West of England sub-region, there are no items. So the first substantive item we've got is item 8, which is the executive response to the call-in of the parking charges decision from the last meeting. So over to you, Councillor Caniford, just to speak to that, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. And first of all, move this out of the way. First of all, thank you to the panel members and the members of the public who attended, and a good attendance, who addressed the panel with their concerns and their points. And, you know, that's democracy at work, and thank you for attending. I'm going to just mention a few points that have raised, not all of them, because we can see those in the reports, but I think it was important to quickly go over a few of them. First of all, I don't think anyone pretends this isn't partly about the financial position the council finds itself in. We do have a position where we do need to manage parking, we do need to manage all our services, but also we do need to make sure we put in place the things that we need to put in place, because if we get into a position where this council cannot afford to pay its bills, the government will certainly put those things in place. I was a bit confused about some of the comments around the consultation. I thought we ran a very good consultation. In actual fact, councillors who criticised the consultation were the very same councillors who said the bin collection 3-week consultation was very good. And it was done in exactly the same time, at the same places, and in the same time scale. So I'm a little confused about that. I imagine it's because the result wasn't what they wanted. But I was happy with the consultation, and I thought officers did a really good job in both of those. It was raised at the panel, and I will still say this, and I think Councillor Burden has quite clearly pointed this out a few weeks ago, that I have always argued that this is a point of fairness. I have always argued that consistency of parking strategy should be across the district. However, I do accept that areas are different. But the strategy should be consistent. And we also address payment solutions, and that is being addressed. The payment solutions that the panel members were concerned about, that it was all going to be app, that is not the case, and that is being addressed. We also had a suggestion that we should charge at sports centres. That's not being taken forward as yet, but it's clearly a consideration if other members on the panel felt it should be considered, because there are clearly pressures on our sports centre parking. And I was concerned about the discrimination towards the elderly, where they suggested they would not be able to afford to park their cars to collect prescriptions. However, they are parking cars, so I assume they can afford the cars. It is about the cost. It will always be about the cost. We need to make sure that what we charge for this parking facilities is appropriate. It was raised, and I will take this forward, moving forward, that if the position is now different regarding parking permits, and we should look at that again for residents in North Somerset, and I'm happy to introduce that piece of work and to continually look at that as part of the ongoing discussions around parking. And I'm today looking for support from the executive around the recommendation, which they've all seen on the papers. Yes, we are working towards the mitigations around community clubs, sports groups and sports organisations in our towns. There was mitigation made in Clevedon. Clevedon's the only place that will get a free half-an-hour parking. That was for business. That was done for business. But to respond to Mr Sims, I'm more than happy to go away and explore those other ideas that he has suggested, and I'll assure them that I will do. And of course, in terms of residents, we will be trialling a residential parking zone in the next year, which we have yet to test, but once tested, if it works, then obviously that will be an option for other towns and other residents where they find there is a pressure on their residential parking. So today, Leader, I'm looking for support from the executive that we have addressed many of those issues. We are happy to look at some of the concerns that they have, and we will do, and I've given that assurance at the scrutiny panel, and I'm looking for my executive colleagues to support the direction of travel we're going in.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. And can I just also acknowledge the submission that we've had from Councillor Smith on behalf of a group of his colleagues with some other detailed proposals and suggestions around the parking strategy, which we're absolutely considering in detail and will respond to that as soon as possible. So just to be clear, the recommendation from the scrutiny panel was that the executive continues to evaluate the impacts on businesses and community groups and develops further mitigations as part of the implementation of the policy. And Councillor Caniford has indicated that we absolutely will do that. So are there any other speakers or questions or comments? So I've got Councillor Ashton first and then Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Mark mentioned that part of the reason was fairness. I was just going to the motive of it. I understand that, but does he mean that even if one of the schemes, like Porter's Head, for example, actually loses money, you'd still carry on with it?
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Mark to pick that up in a moment. Councillor Bird, Mike.
The whole financial modelling and council income on this strategy is based around current usage of the car parks. The idea that use will return to normal, be that initial 60% downturn, creating a good income for the council. I'm afraid this is seriously flawed. What happens elsewhere is no indication what will happen locally. For instance, Clevedon Road car park in Nailsea has about 300 car park spaces, mostly used long-term, Monday to Friday, by the 350 employees of Pelican, Acker, Wessex Water. Side roads are used as overflow, as the car park is full most days. Being slightly out of the town, it's little used for short-term parking. The vast majority of Pelican employees live in Nailsea, Weston, Clevedon and Portishead. Being a call centre, staff incomes are below average. A recent survey said that 92% of the staff drive to work, with the remaining 8% walking and 1 person cycling. Nobody said they used public transport to get to work, but that's a whole another story. If the charges were introduced, 78% said they would find a nearby street to park instead of paying. Only 2.7% said they would consider parking subject to the cost in paid parking. Obviously, that 2.7% may be conservative. However, even if you multiply that, it would leave North Somerset Council well short of the break-even point and way short even of the 60% supposed downturn. The impact on Nailsea residents living near the town would be huge. The executive voted these proposals through based on completely flawed figures. The proposals are based on generating income for North Somerset, and I'm afraid it won't. You can repeat the same as much model across Portishead and Clevedon. I've argued the flaws of short-term parking model for months. Business-wise, why would you sell a product when you have 3 very local sites giving it away for free? It doesn't make sense. Station Road car park has 3 much larger short-term car parks surrounding it, all free. Even if they follow in North Somerset footsteps on charging, you can be sure the supermarkets will introduce free parking on shop receipts. Would you rather spend £2.50 on your shopping or a large bar of chocolate or on parking? This will also draw trade away from the high street. Again, the executive voted through these proposals based on completely flawed figures, and I would ask them therefore to reconsider their decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I've got Councillor Smith next, and then Councillor Homaris, Councillor Young, and then Councillor Blades. Luke.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought to take up the response, the scrutiny panel asked for mitigations, but the response seems to be that everything's covered and it's all fine. But my opinion is that parking charges are miserable little things that never have a purpose. Something I'd argue as a fact is that this policy is genuinely rubbish. Because the action plan's irrelevant to the aims and objectives, the interventions aren't carried over into the action plans, there's no clear point other than to make money, and the action plan, well, for a start, is 6 years. The lifespan of this policy is only 5. So that's a glaring inconsistency as it is. And to be specific on Hill Road, the policy to deter street parking in favour of off-street isn't in the objectives or action plan whatsoever, and it's not reinforced by this policy. Then there is no off-street parking next to the Hill Road or the Hab area, because it's a number of roads. Otherwise, you'd have to ask people to walk, well, a mile, which has obvious accessibility impacts. And then so I do agree with Mr. Sims's mitigations for Hill Road in full, and they would be incredibly sensible. And I would also ask for a point of clarity on when the submission on behalf of my grouping, not necessarily when it would be considered, but more so the format, and if the exec will be publishing a proper list of revised mitigations.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'm pleased to say that your written submission was rather more balanced and constructive than your verbal contribution there. But just specifically on the point about your written submission, we have already started discussions with officers, and we will write to you formally in response, and absolutely we can continue that conversation as we go through the process of the parking strategy. So I can assure you that we'll do that imminently so that you have some clarity about what the next steps will be. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Blades next as a non-exec member, and then I'll come to Jenna and Hannah. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. First off, Councillor Caniford, referring to the consultation, looked over the room or around the room and said the consultation basically was not what we wanted in some sort of weird way. But I mean, it makes me wonder whether it's exactly what you wanted. So that's one question. The other question is, this council is presently seeking help from the three biggest local town councils in a scheme called Delivering Together to try and help the burden on the budget. First off, parking and the budget, we don't actually know what the settlement figure is going to be from the present government. I'd imagine it's not going to be very good, but you never know. If it is, then it does change the dynamics of what we can help with, and more to the point, what we need to do with parking. Parking's been an emotional issue, pretty much, ever since you've been on this council, and so have I, Leader. We've gone round and round trying to work things out with it, and most of the time it's come back to what businesses want, what the people want, what parking permits, etc. This seems to be driven purely on finance, which obviously I can see why, but it's the wrong thing to do. Most of the three big local councils have got their own issues about parking. They're all slightly different, but either way, they're all necessary to business and their residents. And I can't see why, excuse the pun, you can't park it for a couple of months before you think about it properly. I mean, it's such an emotive issue. I mean, I've been a councillor 20 years. You've been on the game for a long time. Realistically, there's emotive issues that come up every time. It's always dog bins, rubbish, refuse, potholes, and parking. The residents demand more than just let's just chuck the parking out, make some money out of it, do what you're going to do, and realistically not necessarily make a great deal out of it compared to a lot of other things. So one, I'd implore you to just put this back a little bit, certainly till we've seen the settlement figures, and re-establish whether some parking, I agree, probably does need to be brought in. There's places even in Clevedon that could probably do with it. It would even help traffic management, I think. And there's some other places where it definitely doesn't want to be. But your proposal at the moment are flawed, as far as I'm concerned. And you could do with just rethinking it and trying to make it more sensible. I'm not saying stop it completely. I think we've discussed it even in Clevedon. There are some things I'd support you with, but there are certain things I definitely will not support you with. And I think that's the crux of it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Homaris, Jenna.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, I'm sorry that I was not able to attend the call-in meeting, but I've read the report and the recommendations, and I think they're all, many of them are very sensible. There's something about evidence-based policy, and we want to support that. And looking at the evidence for and against, which there is both very good for and against evidence, but you know, this is a step that we have to take on balance, pushed ahead due to our precarious financial situation. And I think this is not about predicting the future, because we can't predict the future. You know, we don't know if this is going, you know, let's be honest, we don't actually 100% know if this is going to do what we think it will, but we have to try given our situation. So again, I think back to understanding best value duty, which is that we have to give things a go according to the current situation, and actually we have to monitor it and to see what happens, and if it does come to harm, then you know that we have to take steps. That's our obligation. I agree, though, that people are much more willing to accept pain of policies such as parking charges if they see a clear benefit in the immediate vicinity, and there's lots of evidence from studies showing this. So if we can do that based on our precarious financial situation, then I would like to see it. I'd like to acknowledge and to see us support volunteers, because in this current climate, volunteers, there are many things that we can't do as an authority, but we are also active in our neighbourhoods and in our communities, and we do use volunteer support for a lot of the, in particular, social and community care. And I feel that if there's anything that we can do to support the volunteers, for example, at the lake grounds, volunteers are absolute gold. So I'd like to work with Portishead on that, and other places involving volunteers. In terms of public transportation, I mean, I agree. I think it was pointed out in some of the feedback that we're trying to introduce parking charges in places that don't have any public transportation. That is potentially an issue. It's a real issue, and I think we hear it. We hear it all across the work in our council, and it comes back to me at Health Wellbeing Board over and over again how much we need better public transportation, and this is an immense frustration to us because we are not First Bus. We don't run a bus company. So I just want to find, just again, how can we find a way to work better with the public transport companies that we have in our area, and also local transport groups to sort out a better solution, whether it's some kind of a round the town shuttle bus. Maybe this is the time that we try out these things. And just also to point out the work that Annemieke has been doing in her area with West Local funding to get a commuter bus around. So it is possible, and there is funding out there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. And Councillor Young, Hannah.
Without wanting to divert the discussion too much, just on that specific point, I absolutely am 100% behind trying to get as better public transport as people might expect. And on what we're doing with local groups, we had 2 excellent bus forums last week, and we were talking about what were the priorities for local people, given the announcement of £4.8 million in the budget for further bus service improvement in the next year. So that's really heartening, I think, and a conversation we can have. We're not the bus companies, but even if we were, there's always a difficulty in running commercial services at non-commercial rates. So I think even if we were the bus company at this stage, we'd still have to find money to do what we wanted to do, and that's a critical issue. Anyway, that said, what I wanted to say on the parking management strategy, I think it's really heartening and very important. I'm very pleased to hear that Councillor Caniford has committed to explore the further ideas that have been put forward, particularly by the Hill Road, Alexandra Road and Bellevue traders regarding mitigations. Thank you, Mark, for that. And in that, I think that the question of parking enforcement is absolutely critical. And listening to Councillor Homaris talking about the importance of volunteers, I've had a number of people in my local area particularly talking about, can we volunteer to be parking enforcement officers? Because actually that would be a much better solution than putting charges in place. I know that we've looked in detail over the course of many months now, and others before that, around what are the options on this, and we've come to a relatively narrow set of options. But that said, I do think if we're considering further mitigations, there may be more that we can do around enforcement, and I know that's something we've been talking about outside this meeting. I think it's fair to say that the financial assumptions underpinning the model are based on a certain level of enforcement, but we all know how difficult it is to attract people to these roles. So I think potentially we do need to think about being more creative, whether that's so that we can offer greater mitigations or whether it enables us to derive more income that helps to fill our financial gap. And that's a question for the future. But I do think that that's an important area, as Mark knows. I think it's also really important that where there's a legal basis, where the legal basis for charging is for traffic management, that is on-street parking, it's really important to make sure that that data is transparent. And I'm still hearing concerns that we might not have been as transparent as we could have been on that. So, and that I think is critical so that communities have confidence in our genuine commitment to openness and believe the legitimacy of this approach. So I hope, again, as we work through the mitigations, we can just review what's already been shared and look at whether there's any additional information that potentially we could share that would help communities with that. Lastly, I don't want to do a Councillor Whitfield and talk all day, but I do welcome Councillor Smith's comments about the linkages of the parking management strategy with EV charging strategy and the bus service improvement plan, and I'm more than happy to work with Councillor Caniford and the transport team to make those links more explicit in the future. And absolutely, we want to make sure that these things are visibly aligned. I think they are aligned in the background. I think we're working on all of these things, but we need to make that visibly clear for our communities if it's not. So thank you for that, Councillor Smith. And also, Councillor Blades, that's the first time I've heard you say that you would support parking charges in any way, shape or form in Clevedon. So I'd be really delighted to hear which bits you think are important for the future. Useful to have that conversation. But apart from that, thank you very much. I look forward to discussing the mitigations further as we move through the process.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Councillor Caniford, do you want to just sum up?
Yeah, just sum up and quickly just what we're discussing here today is what the scrutiny panel put in to resolve. There were a few questions coming in, which I will quickly cover. Councillor Ashton was talking about what's fair and fairness. Let's be clear, we didn't introduce the principle of parking, you did. And we are just using that tool that you introduced now. So in 2012, we had introduced the parking in North Somerset. It was said then that it would be rolled out over the years, and it has. So, Councillor Bird, in terms of the numbers used, the 40 to 60% reduction is all about the business planning. That is not what is predicted to happen. That is about the figures you challenged with regards to the break-even point. So it's about the business planning and what could happen before any loss was ever made, which is actually a higher level than that. That is not what is expected in those car parks. But I will challenge you and challenge back. You keep using the fact that no one will use Station Road. Are you telling me that you have an oversupply of car parking in Nailsea? Because that was a really interesting point regarding our development plans. And I'm happy to have a consideration and a conversation with you over that. And Councillor Blades, just want to be sure about the criticism you just put on. What I said was the consultation was exactly the same as that as the waste. Everyone seemed to be happy with the waste consultation, but those opposed to parking thought the parking consultation was rubbish. So I'm not quite sure how you can have the two. You can't say one was good and one was bad when it was done exactly the same. What you were saying is because you didn't like the result, it was rubbish. So that's all I have said to you, just to be clear. And I'm still looking for support currently. And yes, I will pick up those mitigations people have talked about, and certainly will look at the opportunities we can with the business community.
I can see that Councillor Ashton is gesturing, so I'm going to let you have a right of reply.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I simply would like an answer to my question, not the one that you hoped I'd ask, the one I actually did ask. It was not about the rights or wrongs of car parking. It was simply, if a scheme loses money, as I suspect some of them might do because people will object to it, will you continue with it, because it's fair, even though you're going to lose money, which seems to be daft?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Ashton. No, of course, one of the things we'll commit with the reply, if I can say, in the reply that we will be giving you, is that we will be setting these KPIs and letting scrutiny look at those numbers. We'll give you that in an official reply. And of course, if it's losing money, we need to discuss that, and we'll work with scrutiny and policy panels to see how that mitigation can be made. Of course, that's not where we are. We don't believe that will be the case. We're using exactly the same similar types of modelling that you used 10 years ago, and we do not believe that will be the case. So, yes, we are willing to commit to looking at it, and sorry I missed your question in the first instance.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's been a good debate, a little bit of a rehashing of the original decision, but that's okay. Just to make sure exec colleagues are completely clear, all we're doing is noting the feedback from the scrutiny panel, and Councillor Caniford has said that we will indeed consider further mitigations and options as we proceed with the delivery of the parking strategy as approved. So is everyone happy to support that, please? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, which is the medium-term financial plan for 25 to 28. And our draft revenue budget proposals for the next financial year, 2025-26. So firstly, can I just thank all those members who attended the budget briefing that was led by our officers a couple of weeks ago, which gave members an overview of these proposals and the direction of travel in terms of the MTFP over the next 3 years. You'll know both from that briefing and from the report that we've got a £53 million budget gap over the 3-year period, and we have sought to identify savings, efficiencies, and I'm going to use the word cuts because that's what it is, to a number of areas in order to try and balance the budget. So we have reduced the budget gap over the 3-year period as a result of those decisions to about £7.5 million, but with that front-loaded to 25-26. So the report sets out 40 million plus of proposals in terms of service transformation, efficiencies and spending cuts. But that we're still about £2.5 million short of where we need to be for 25-26. Obviously, critically, we have not yet had the full local government finance settlement from government, so we don't know the detail and the precise numbers that we're going to see in the government settlement, although we have been given the government's policy position paper on the local government finance settlement, which gives us some indications of the direction of travel, particularly in relation to the capping limit remaining at 5%. We've launched these proposals for further debate and discussion within the council with stakeholders and through public consultation and engagement, which is already underway. And I would encourage all members to read through the details, ask questions, ask for briefings in your political groups, through the policy and scrutiny panels and individually with exec members and relevant directorates, so that we can make sure that we are challenging and scrutinising the proposals in detail and continue to contribute to the process of trying to set a balanced budget. What I would say is that, you know, nothing dramatic has changed. So although the new government has absolutely delivered very positive mood music in terms of the direction of travel and a commitment to reforming local government finance and moving to multi-year settlements, which will be extremely helpful for us as a council in planning. What we haven't seen is action immediately on that. So in terms of where we are now and future years, we still don't have that clarity and certainty. So we are going to continue to have extremely difficult conversations and difficult choices in terms of some of our proposals. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as set out in the report, which is to note the proposals and consult on those over the next couple of months, and welcome any comments or questions that colleagues wish to raise today. Okay, Annemieke, Councillor Waite.
Thank you, and I apologise if this is a bit lengthier than I would normally like it to be. When I campaigned to become a local councillor about 18 months ago, I was warned off by very many people, and they all said, why would you? Because there's no money in local councils. You'll only be making cuts, and boy, were they right. 18 months on, I find myself in exactly that position, and it's not a comfortable place. So like everyone here on the executive, I welcome the government's additional funding for local authorities, but it's clear that it is nowhere near enough for us to continue to provide the services that we should and wish to deliver to our residents. Years of underinvestment have brought this council to a point where we face yet again a budget shortfall, which legally we are required to close. So cuts need to be made, efficiencies introduced, and this time they will strip our services to the bone, I'm afraid. One way or another, everyone will be affected, whether this is proposed review of the council tax support scheme or the future of libraries or the introduction of car parking charges that we just talked about. Many of these proposals and programmes support the health and well-being of our communities. And to have to make cuts like these really goes against everything I stood for at the elections in 23. And I do have real concerns about the potential impact of some of these proposed cuts and what they will do to the vulnerable in our communities. And yet, without more government funding, we have no choice but to put all these on the table. With my portfolio hat on, I do want to briefly talk about climate change, because that too will affect the most vulnerable, the people who are least able to protect themselves. As a council, we should be uniquely placed to take on the responsibility of protecting communities from the effects of climate change and to prepare the region for these through the actions that we set out in our climate adaptation strategy, whether this is retrofitting homes, building net zero affordable homes as we go forward, or by supporting nature and biodiversity. However, to do this and to do it well, we require huge amounts of government funding, and there is no real sign of this happening in the short term or in sufficient amounts to make our programmes viable. So the funding shortage is very real, and the impact of all our work across and will impact all our work across all portfolios. So as Mike just said, the funding allocation is historical, and I would say historically inaccurate. In simple terms, it means we get less money per head of population compared to other councils. And to this council's credit, these finances have been managed so carefully for so long, but there is a finite amount of budget cuts that can be absorbed, and I think we have reached that point. It is time for a fairer funding deal, and therefore I would really urge anyone who might be watching us on the telly this afternoon to sign our fair funding petition, which is listed on our website. And in the meantime, we have difficult decisions to make on these proposals as time passes. So despite all my concerns, a balanced budget does need to be set because it's a legal requirement. And I do find that very difficult, but we obviously have no choice. And I do thank you for listening to this because it is a genuine concern of mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Annemieke. Jenna, Councillor Home-Harris.
Thank you, Chair. So, I have a few things I want to say about this. First, we have, on page 30, we set out procedure for quality impact assessments for proposals, which is on the 9 protected groups, encompassing the 9 protected characteristics, and also low income, even though that is not a protected characteristic. And next Friday the 13th, there is scheduled a full-day detailed equality impact assessment panel review with myself and as an observer. So this is a really important part of the process to make sure we really go through in detail what the impacts are. And actually, if some of them are really that serious, then we do have to very seriously consider whether we do them or not. So next thing is about the engagement process. I really welcome officers' decision this time round to bring the process much earlier to us to start understanding and looking at budget impacts and the risks. And also I commend the extensive engagement process that we have done this time round, using also a citizens panel, online budget simulator, and an engagement survey, and also colleagues going out to around the area to speak to people. I think a lot about the engagement process. It's not just in relation to the budget, but also in terms of all our other work, including bus lanes, including development of our own land. And it's because engagement is good for people's health. According to the Institute of Health Equity, the reports by, a number of you know the Michael Marmot reports on health equities, they list a number of topics which are essential to change the dire state of health equities in this country. The first thing is to give each child the best start in life. And the second is to enable all children, young people and adults to maximize their capabilities and have control over their lives. And this is, long story short, it's to do with a study done with 17,000 Whitehall officials from, I think, 30 years ago, where they looked at hierarchy and health, and they found that actually, even though people at the top, perhaps, of the hierarchy would have more stress, in fact, they have better health, and taking into account all factors, it's actually because they have much more control over their life and their work. So engagement and consultation is really important to improving people's health and well-being, provided that we actually listen and change the outcomes of what we do according to what people say. The next thing is about making sense of the feedback that we got. In the consultation, we did have people say that crime and community safety is at the very top of their concerns, and I would absolutely agree with that. That's also echoing the kind of feedback that I get from my ward council work. I mean, this could be about getting more police on the streets, which we can't control, but it also means things like youth justice, children's centres, taking care of our young people, and basic things just like just feeding people and helping them heat their homes. working with neighbouring councils. And it sits uncomfortably with some of the budget cuts that we have to consider, such as the council tax support for 7,000 low-income households. So it's just to acknowledge the difficulties in balancing, but at the same time, understanding that it's a whole council approach to what we're trying to do. Quickly on the carbon impact, we say that we have this section where we talk about climate impacts of all our papers, and often it's a sort of 2 lines to say that we have considered it, which is helpful. And I think in this case, we say this is particularly highlighting the climate impacts of further investment and budget savings in relation to schools and roads. And I suppose we've got transport is 42% of our emissions, domestic use, so homes, heating our homes, is 24% of emissions. So homes, work and schools and shops and how we get round all have real impacts on health and climate. So I hope that in future we are looking also at co-benefits of climate and health equity in relation to council investments. And finally, in relation to risk management, again, I want to emphasise this best value duty. And to me, it means we are looking at all areas of the council, and it's about continuous improvement. And I just want to acknowledge the efforts of officers and fellow councillors and all our anchor organisations and partners in doing our best in this current situation, and also lobbying the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I can't see any other hands. So can I also just take the opportunity to thank all of the officers from the corporate leadership team down for all their hard work so far. We've got a long way to go through this process, and we're going to talk in a moment about the in-year challenges as well. But I want to particularly acknowledge that we have had very challenging circumstances, not just this year and next year, but for a long time in local government. And we all know and recognise that officers are having to try and do more and more with less and less. And in particular, in the context of our budget proposals for next year, there will be teams and individuals who are either at risk or who are feeling under significant pressure and scrutiny in terms of some of the proposals. And it's not an easy environment for anyone to be operating in. So we do absolutely recognise that and appreciate the support and engagement that all of our officers and staff put into this process. What I would also say that's come through from the public engagement is that there is a lot of cynicism about, I'm putting it mildly, about local government and how effective and efficient we are. And a lot of that cynicism is absolutely unfounded and unjustified. And so I want to also say on behalf of all of us as councillors that we do appreciate and value the work that our officers do at every level, and the significant contribution that they're all making in difficult circumstances to the life of North Somerset residents. And I would just say to all of them, probably don't pay too much attention to social media, and you keep doing the good job that you are doing. So I'm going to propose that recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Annemieke. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay, and we'll move on to the next item, which is item 10, the budget monitor. So I'm sorry to say more of the same here. So I'm happy to move the recommendations which relate to noting our month 6 update and also some changes to revenue and capital budgets in line with additional grant funding that we've received. So particularly a further allocation for another year from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. You'll note again that we are reporting as of month 6 that the forecast overspend for the current financial year is now 8.2 million. So that's down from the 25 million or so that we were initially forecasting. And the work that we have done through the directorates to release reserves, to try and reduce non-essential spending, introduce vacancy management controls and deliver other interventions to cut costs has had some impact. However, we are still not in a position where we can be confident that we'll be able to balance the in-year budget. And the latest information that I have is that the position is broadly similar. So what we are not seeing as the year progresses is that number going down very much from where it is reported in this month's budget monitor. And I think it's important for colleagues to note that this is really different to where we've been before, because those of us who've been around a long time will know that we quite often would have forecast an overspend early in the financial year and get things back on track by the end. We're absolutely not in that position, because what we are seeing is those demand and cost pressures, particularly for children and adults' social care, are just not going away. And as we've tried to articulate through the budget engagement process and in our conversations with members, there is very little that we can do, and we certainly don't have quick levers to try and influence some of those spending pressures. So we are still very much in a difficult and challenging position in terms of getting our current financial position back on track in order to deliver a balanced budget by year end. And that is why we are continuing to communicate with government through our MPs and through officials, and to try and communicate with our residents and partners that we are still in an extremely fragile financial position, and that the risk of exceptional financial support being required and the risk of a Section 114 notice is absolutely still present, and that problem has not gone away. So again, I just want to thank officers for everything that they're doing to try and help mitigate those cost pressures as best we can in the current financial year. And I would encourage all councillors particularly to bear in mind that we are absolutely in a uniquely difficult situation. So those of you that email every day with new requests and new demands for urgent action, be reasonable and pragmatic about what we can achieve when we're in these kinds of financial situations. Okay, can I have a seconder then for the recommendations? Thank you, Mark. Does anyone wish to comment? Nope. Okay, all those in favour then, please. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, we'll move on to item 11, which is the local plan approval of next steps on the consultation. Councillor Canniford, Mark.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'll try and... There's just a few comments I would like to make around this before... and we do have officers in rooms if there's any complicated questions that I can't answer. But I think what we're doing here isn't controversial with councillors, however, is of great concern to our residents. There's no doubt about that. And we are trying to build a process, the sequential process, so we can really build a policy around how we're doing this. And I still think that is our favoured approach, as it says in the recommendations here. We are looking at other slight changes to that in terms of higher windfall numbers in our villages, because members have quoted that they would like to see some of that. So we're not totally fixed. We can look at how that works. The 6-week consultation will take place in the new year, and it's been said today by Angela Rayner. She has confirmed that the additional 9,000 houses are mandatory. She said it on BBC News today. She has told every council who challenged those numbers yesterday that they are mandatory. She'll find them if the councils don't. So let's be mindful of that, and let's not make the mistake to allow that to happen. The responses that during this consultation, of course, the responses will be used to help identify the potential development sites that are required to meet this new target. And therefore, they will then go forward to the new Reg 19, because clearly the last one is effectively gone because of the housing numbers that we now find ourselves having to find. In the previous Reg 19, we obviously made the decision to protect the green belt. We now know, under the proposals that are coming through the NPPF, that approach has now been relaxed. And the only change that I think we will find will be the strengthening of flood protections in flood zone 3s. We have paused the process to find the additional sites. So officers gone back out with another SLAR, as we call it, which is a call for sites from developers, a strategic housing land availability assessment. And we have had a few new sites come forward, which will be considered and looked at their sustainability and whether that fits within our methodology and how we move forward. Of course, we do need a robust approach, because when this gets sent to the planning inspectorate, if it isn't robust, it will be thrown out. Now, there is no doubt that there is a huge amount of pressure on the whole district. The government have been very clear they are happy to help, but not if to find the numbers, but how to find the numbers. And we have to identify, though. I cannot stress that enough. We will have to identify sites, and we do need to look at identifying those sites in sustainable, accessible locations near urban facilities, so our residents, because they will be our residents when they move in, have the opportunities of the facilities that are in our house in those areas. Of course, I think we really must emphasise the fact increased housing numbers will mean increased employment space. We do need to find places for jobs, but, and this is the one I want councillors to work with, we do understand that infrastructure must come with the development. We can't just stick houses out with nothing. It will not work. We all know that. Officers know that, and we must have that infrastructure with it. So I will be working with councillors who have favoured locations, who have identified locations, so we can discuss how we can support that and move that to the next stage of the consultation. We won't let the consultation go out until we've seen the parameters of the NPPF, so we don't end up shooting ourselves in the foot if the parameters change. So I've been given the recommendations, give me the ability to hold on to that and look at that before we send it out. So I can assure you that we will look at those parameters before we go forward and make sure that everything we're doing is in line with what we're being told to achieve. I look support for the recommendations.
Thank you, Mark. Can I have a seconder first? Thank you, Catherine. Okay, Peter Burden, Councillor Burden.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't envy Councillor Canniff for this one. I was hoping that the Secretary of State would have learned a little bit from the late Lord Prescott, because he, I think, had a lot better approach and a lot more realistic approach to housing numbers than she has. The totally unrealistic figures fired onto this council, you cannot possibly use the word sustainable in the same sentence as what we've been asked to do as a council. Chairman, we are heading down this road. I accept Mark's point totally that we have to find these sites, however regrettable it is. But in the words of the famous people who watch things like auctions on television, there's often a word given with discretion. And the one bit which worries me here, as I believe this council should stick strongly to sustainable principles, even if the government doesn't, I think looking at the sequential approach for assessment, if we go strictly to what is the wording in our local plan, we can end up with some extremely perverse results. And some government sustainability might tick a box because we had an interpretation of sustainability by the council's barrister a fortnight ago, and it was basically his interpretation. His interpretation of government policy is, if it's in the local plan, it's sustainable, which I think any of us here have to say is completely bonkers. So, Chairman, with that twist, if we can allow as much discretion as possible on the use of the sequential approach, because I think if this district is going to expand, we have to make sure it expands in a sustainable way. And I bear very hard, still got the scars on my back from proposing major development in Portishead, and it was major development when I put it forward. And we had everybody promising us the government will help and you'll have a railway line by the late 80s and early 90s. I'm sorry, Chairman, I don't believe governments on this one, so we have to ourselves make sure we go for truly sustainable locations, not just tick box locations.
Thank you very much. Chris Blades, sorry, you were hiding there. Chris.
Try my best. Somewhat cynical. It's not as if we've been here before, is it really? It goes round and round, and yet they give us more targets and less things to do with it. You mentioned Angela Rayner this morning stating something. I'm not aware of that, but I knew it was coming. But you also referenced the NPPF, which presumably they're going to change or amend. And I'm led to believe that's possibly before Christmas, which, to an extent, good on your own words there, makes it somewhat academic voting on this at the moment, because if they change it that much, we're going to have to rejig what we consult on. So where are we with that?
Okay, thank you, Chris. Luke Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to try and tease a bit more detail on the approach out. Obviously, it's for consultation, so the specifics will come out in the wash, no doubt. But I just wondered, with the application of the sequential approach, will the consultation be that approach applied to the sites, or will it be a more broader base of what's available? Because I would just note that if there's a consultation the council has to demonstrate it's listening to, I think it's got to be this one.
Okay, thank you. And I'm gonna throw a couple more into. Oh, actually, I've got Annemieke. I'll bring Annemieke in first.
Thank you. Put my glasses back on, otherwise I can't see my notes. I know that the draft NPPF said that green belt should only be considered if there's no brown or grey belt areas to be found, and even then it should go hand in hand with funding for infrastructure, and I hugely welcome that in the draft document, and I hope very much that that is still in the final document when it does come out. So it should go hand in hand with infrastructure. It should be 50% affordable, and it should be built to future home standard. And in my view, it is absolutely essential that any home building is of that ilk, and in respect, particularly if we bear in mind the climate emergency strategy and our related carbon footprint. So the need for quality infrastructure for residents is all about, not just about things like schools and doctor surgeries and all the things that our residents need when we build a new community. But it's also about how people travel around the area. And I know that Councillor Caniford, Mark, has very kindly offered to work with those councillors in areas where there is large-scale proposal for house building, and my area is one of those that borders onto Long Ashton. South Bristol Link Road is going to feature massively in that. I have huge concerns about that, and I do want to know what the government is going to do in terms of its infrastructure planning there, because the roads around the A370 and the A38 are very regularly congested as they are, and so is the South Bristol Link Road. If you add another 4,000 or so homes to that, it's going to be chaos. And so I do want to see some very detailed plans about how that would be managed if these developments were come to fruition, particularly if you bear in mind the newly published master plan for Bristol Airport. Currently, they fly 10 million people a year. They want to go to 15 million people a year, so that's another 5 million up and down the A38. So I think we're going to be looking at some serious issues. I absolutely accept that houses need to be built, and if they are going to be built on that green belt, we need to make absolutely sure that they are going to be built to the very highest ability. And I do thank Councillor Burden for his comment about sustainability. I think this is going to be absolutely essential, not just in terms of location, but also in terms of the types of homes that we build. So I had a long meeting this morning with Michael Reep about various things to do with the local plan, and I know that our local plan has been built and written over the years, and it is in many ways very, very robust. And I would like to think that as these things start to happen, that plan will stand up to scrutiny and ensure that we can enforce all these requirements that are currently in the draft NPPF, and hopefully will stay in there in the final one as well. And I, for one, shall certainly want to insist on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Annemieke. Catherine Gibbons, Councillor Catherine Gibbons.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that obviously I welcome broadly the fact that there is a commitment from the government to build as many homes as possible, because like many councillors, I deal almost on a weekly basis with families that can't find adequate accommodation, and there isn't the right accommodation. And we have a housing shortage, but I completely take on board everything that Annemieke has said about it being the right kind of development. What I wanted to ask Councillor Caniford was, you've highlighted the fact that if we don't identify the sites, then that will be done for us. So in terms of the consultation, will you be able to make that very clear to communities, what the implications for them will be if we can't do this ourselves and control is taken out of our hands? Thank you.
I'm really enjoying by the fact that we're creating loads and loads of questions that Mark's got to remember. So this is going to be really entertaining. Councillor Homaris, Jenna.
Thank you. So just to reiterate that I do support this, but the process is not over yet. We're still in the process, and I do have some concerns that I hope will be addressed at some point during this local plan process. There are a lot of things that are not explicitly covered in this paper, which I accept. This is about the location of additional development sites and the process for consultation. But one of those things is health, and as the exec member of responsibility for health and equalities, we don't explicitly talk about it, although I am assured by officers that health is going to be woven into the plan, and even more so with these additional 9,000 homes that we are going to have to put somewhere. On the climate and nature emergency, we don't actually refer to the implications of building these 23,000 homes. I don't think we have a carbon budget, actually, and how would this factor in? So, you know, and further to that, if we've got 23,000 homes, does that mean at least 46,000 cars or more? So with implications, again, on health, but also congestion, and I mean, there's a whole other, a number of other things. We do need a density, apparently, of about 60 homes per hectare to support public transportation, a thriving public transportation. So I suppose the comment is, how are we able to get climate and nature worked into these 23,000 homes as part of a budget? The next thing is about rural and village development. So in our current SP4, we do say that the amount of development of villages and the countryside will relate to local community needs. Now, in my area, Pill, we have a neighbourhood plan which was passed a number of years ago by vote, and that envisaged 100 to 150 homes, and not 1,100, which is what's being proposed here. And the reality is, on a day-to-day basis, we have already got numerous parking issues in a number of neighbourhoods. I'm sure it's the same in a lot of other wards. That leads to conflict. The reality is the police are unwilling or unable to enforce because they've got resource issues and priority issues. And the reality is that waste often have difficulties reversing their trucks in to pick up people's rubbish, etc., etc. So I'd like to see a way that we try, going back to Councillor Burden's definition of what is actually sustainable development. I mean, I think it's something that I want us to take this opportunity to really investigate. So also on affordable housing, I know national government has assured us that if we do build on Greenbelt, 50% of that is going to be affordable. So how do we ensure that this affordable housing is actually built, rather than, as colleagues of all stripes have told me and have said over and over again, that the amount of affordable housing is approved in planning, but then it just gets squeezed as developers start building, and then they say, well, it's not viable anymore, it's that V word, and some of it is never built. We have a national viability requirement, I think, that is something that is not necessarily for us to be able to challenge at our level, but you know, somebody needs to be questioning what is actually viable, who is able to look at what's viable, and how do we use this to actually build the housing that we need and our residents need, instead of what developers want. Finally, on infrastructure, so again, my colleague has mentioned the Portishead-Bristol Railway, which we are all hoping and praying gets the funding that it needs, finally. But infrastructure is also about the essential health infrastructure, GP surgeries, or possibly even what we, national government has called them integrated neighbourhood clinics. We don't know how those will be. So it's health, roads, public transport, footpaths, and all manner of other aspects. How will we make sure that we are planning with a view to? We've got to assume to a certain extent that perhaps some of it isn't going to come from central government, and what happens then? So I look forward to figuring out how we work through the practicalities of that. So I just want to commend colleagues for lobbying the government to help understand the situation that we have in North Somerset, and also our MPs' efforts in lobbying for a fairer for a better result in North Somerset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I've got 4 more to throw onto your list, Mark, sorry. So the first one is, I'm just taking the opportunity to air these things whilst we're talking about it. I'm not necessarily expecting an answer. The first one is, I completely agree with the comments about the timing of our consultation and our approach to the local plan and the new MPPF, because clearly, although we know, and the steer from the Deputy Prime Minister has been really clear, we've got to deliver the housing target and there's no wriggle room. What we don't know is the detail in terms of some of the policies that will be in place, both in terms of green belt and floodplain and so on. And I think it is important that we make sure that we are consulting from an informed basis. Now, hopefully the timing will work out perfectly, but I think that is important. Secondly, I still am concerned that we haven't evidenced that we've properly evaluated the green belt. I think it was an issue that we discussed before in our previous iteration. How are we judging the merits of the green belt land that we've already got, and how are we evidencing the places that need to come out and the places that might need to be added to the green belt going forward? And I think that's an important part of the conversation as well. I completely agree with colleagues on the sequential approach. I think there is room to tighten that up and be clearer about what we mean. And what I would also like to see is more evidence of the weighting that we're giving to the sequential approach, because there are clearly some sites which obviously tick the box in terms of option 1. I think the further down the list you go, the less obvious it is that there's a connection between the sequential approach and what we're proposing. So I would like to understand the weighting and how we've determined which sites are in and which ones aren't. And then lastly, that point about infrastructure, which many colleagues have made. In the end, we won't be able to deliver any of it if we can't have the infrastructure. We can't fund the infrastructure. You know, we're already in a space where critical infrastructure, we're completely dependent on government funding to make it happen. And we've seen over and over again where delays and problems have arisen, even when government does fund something and makes the commitment, we still don't deliver it particularly quickly. And I also just want to make a plea that infrastructure has to be for everyone in North Somerset and not only those new communities, because, you know, growth has to be good for everybody in the community and everyone must benefit from it, not just new communities. I was really struck by somebody who came to one of the budget engagement sessions a couple of weeks ago in Clevedon, who quite rightly said, I'm prepared to put up with growth in Nailsea and new housing developments, but why is it that the new housing development gets a wonderful new road and a wonderful new house to live in and a wonderful new cycle lane, and all the rest of us that put up with all the inconvenience of a new development get absolutely nothing? And I think that's a really valid point. And when we look around North Somerset, we know that there are communities that are crying out for investment in health and in public transport and in jobs, and they're not getting it, and it can't all be about growth. So if the government wants the ends, it has to make sure that it gives us the means as well. There you go, Mark. So you've got about 5 minutes to wrap that
well,
all
I'll
up.
rattle through those, but I'll just put Michael and Marcus on warning around the weighting and some of the sequential approach details that we've been asked. So to reply to Peter, if I can be so bold, just call you Peter. Yeah, you're right. 800 to 900 houses is the most we've built in a booming year. And now we're being asked to deliver 1,500 houses going forward without really the skills out there to do this. So I'm totally sympathetic to your view, but I'm not in the position to be able to bang on Angela's door and say you're being ridiculous. However, we will achieve it. We'll make sure we get there. And, you know, towards a consultation, I'm really happy to discuss with members about the process and whether we've got that exactly right. We're looking at going to consultation, and that won't happen till the new year. There is time for us to discuss those things. It's a consultation at this stage. I will make sure I engage with members right through that process and have the opportunity there. Chris, the MPPF is supposed to come out on the 19th of December. Pretty much everything they've said they're going to do has been delayed, so I'm not sure that will happen either. And yes, we must know what the numbers are, what the principles are. You're quite right. This stage is to get us ready for consultation, and that consultation will reflect things that are in the NPPF. So we won't certainly go out until we know that. I can assure you of that, because that would just be mad. Okay. So I think in terms of brown and greenfield sites, which were commented by Annemieke, I think, we need to remember that those are already in the 15,000 houses. That, you know, we've got those. If we want to, we can't build on them twice. So we've got that already in the current approach. The sequential approach has been adopted since 2019, and some of these will answer some of Mike's questions. We adopted that 2019 with a lot of discussion, because the previous reiteration, the core strategy, which the inspector threw out in, I think, 2018-19, is because, and it wasn't just a North Somerset issue, it was the whole area, the whole greater area around Weka, were tending to pick and choose sites without any real reason why they were picking and choosing them. It just favoured local members. We were happy to put it here without any real infrastructure, without any real ability to live in those spaces. So we mustn't make that mistake again, because that leads on to what Councillor Gibbons was saying. The longer we leave this, the more risk we are at. Developers are already flying in applications, outline applications for developments. They want to get into us before we can get out to them with what our plans are. So we do need to make sure that we get this process through robustly but quickly. And we need to make sure there's a lot of work in the new year with members to try and carry them along with this process, but also to allow them to affect the local plan rather than just impose a local plan. So all those issues I'm really happy with. Councillor Harris, you know, the fact is we do now, and you supported, I think, as part of the biodiversity net gain. You know, in theory, we should find a better environment in these areas if we follow our policies properly. There is a net gain, not a net loss. And I think in terms of parking policies and cars, I do understand your concerns. But, you know, a few years ago, we adopted policies that meant every new home would have to have electric charging, either installed or ready for installation with all the wires in place. That is still the case, and that will not change. Mike, I think some of the questions I've answered. The evaluation of the Greenbelt, I'll let Marcus or Michael answer, and the waiting on the sequential approach. It's something that we've been working on for quite a long time, but I'm not averse to how we work with members and where we think there should be some tweaks in that. And I agree with you entirely, and I've been discussing with planning officers for a little while the fact infrastructure should be for all and not just for the people who are sitting in a new shiny house. So I'm more than happy to carry that forward, and hopefully the council will carry that forward as an approach going forward into the future, because everyone should benefit from if we have development and money paid into our community through S106 monies, it should be for everyone and not just for people who have got the shiny new roads and lampposts. Michael, if you'd like to just comment.
Okay, yes. Anything you want to add, Michael?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Couple of things there in terms of picking up firstly the sort of spatial approach. It's not a mechanistic process. It does require choices and does require balance. So I think that's the point. We want to go out for consultation. So we set out the broad structure and framework, and I think the point about the joint spatial plan is a very good one. We need that to everybody to be clear what the broad framework is, but there are choices and a planning balance to be made. So we are prepared to look at that sensibly in terms of individual sites and their contributions to overall sustainability. The point about the Greenbelt, we've done a lot of work through the local plan on evaluating Greenbelt. There's a lot of work published in terms of the role of the Greenbelt, the purposes of different cells of Greenbelt in terms of how they contribute to the Greenbelt aims, such as preventing sprawl and separation of settlements. So a lot of that is out there. We are continuing to review that, particularly in light of the government's new category of grey belt, and we'd be interesting to see what happens with the consultation on that with grey belt, because we understand that we've got to prioritise grey belt, all other things being equal. But one of the inherent contradictions of Greenbelt policy is the most sensitive sites for Greenbelt are also the more sustainable, because more sensitive sites tend to be on the inner edge, around the edge of Bristol, where it's arguably that they are more sustainable. So there's always a tension between these two concepts.
And Leader, if I can, just the one point I was remiss of me is I really do need to thank the policy planning team. They have done a huge amount of work. They've had this thrown back at them after us nearly getting there. And they have been so adaptive to the council's demands and needs, and I would just like to thank them for the huge amount of work they're doing, and having
got to a position where they thought they had a Reg 19, they're starting again from really an 18 minus position. So I just wanted to put that on record.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. So we've got the recommendation, which is to proceed to consultation based on the theme set out in the paper. So is everyone happy to support the recommendations? Yep. Thank you very much. And thank you, colleagues. Good debate on that paper. Okay, so I've now got item 12, which is the support services ICT contract and commissioning for remaining services. So the report covers the proposal to enter into a 10-year contract with Delt Shared Services in line with the previous decision that Council has made on this matter back in September. So you'll recall that essentially we are becoming a shareholder of Delt Shared Services, and I would describe it as a really good package of proposals. So we're going to save money, we're going to deliver good quality support services, and we're going to enable the council to be part of and co-own a public sector-led business, so that critically any profits can be returned to us and our partners in the public sector rather than any other shareholders. So really positive set of proposals that's hopefully going to stand us in good stead over the next decade. So the recommendation is to ask officers to proceed to do that. And we've also got the commissioning plan for some of the other support service contracts. So that's including the contact centre, some facilities management and payroll, where we're also out to look at alternative delivery models and options in the market to provide those contracts. So I'm happy to move those recommendations and ask for a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Any questions or comments? Yes, go on, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm totally in support of this coming from an IT background. It will give us far more control. We'll be able to react far quicker than we've been able to in the past. Also, it'll give us a company with the flexibility to expand that company and perhaps in the future take on other council services. So I think it's a very, very positive move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll take the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations, please. Thank you very much. I'm going to count you even though you're standing up, Annamika, so that's okay. Oh, especially, right, okay. I don't think that complies with standing orders at all, but we'll gloss over it. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Item 13 is the CareLink commissioning plan, so that's over to you, Councillor Whitfield. Roger.
Thank you very much, Mike. Hopefully I won't take too long over this one. And thank you very much to Gerald for the paper and your team for all your work on this one. We currently use the CareLink monitoring alarm service for 2,066 of customers, and the council is fully funding the fees of only 10 of these customers. This is mainly funded by the end users themselves. However, we find that on the CareLink system, the number of customers has been falling, and occasionally the equipment can be quite unreliable as well. This contract's been in place since 1996, and what it consists of is an alarm unit and a pendant in people's homes, so that if they have a fall or an emergency and they can't get to the telephone, they can push the button on their pendant and summon some help from our call centre. The current contract ends in September 2025. But as I said, the CareLink system is not without its problems. It's reliant upon analogue phone lines, and we'll probably all remember the days of dial-up when you could only use either the internet or your telephone, but not both at the same time. And this is using the old telephone part of the system. It's not digital compatible. It could be made digital compatible, but there is quite an extreme cost to doing that. Tech never stands still, and over the years there's been significant improvements in this field. As I said, since 1996 we're looking at really old tech at the moment. We have a digital switchover coming in 2027. I know it's been put off, but BT and the government are going to push ahead with this. This is going to get rid of the analogue phone lines, and obviously every time one disappears from a CareLink property, you're going to lose that facility to summon help. So we do need to do something, and it would seem an opportune point to do that. If we were to replace the equipment, we'd be looking at having to pay somewhere between £350,000 and £400,000. And given our financial situation, I can imagine that would be extremely difficult. There are other operators in the market that have already invested in this new technology and are using it very successfully. Monitoring is a key part of our technology-enabled care strategy, and we need to promote a robust and modern solution to end users. Users normally pay for the service. We need more users, not less, because of our reliance on this in the future. But the technology that we're using at the moment has been holding us back. New technology comes with new responsibilities, but we currently do not have sufficient resource in-house to undertake both the management and the rollout of a new service. We are therefore looking to commission an outsourced solution from the open market. And I'm sure some people will say, why not in-house? I've heard that many times from many people. Benchmarking on this has shown an open market solution to be the most cost-effective route, delivering real value for money. The limited number of customers that we have on this makes an in-house solution very expensive when compared to the efficiencies of scale that a national provider can achieve. In-house is not always better, especially where specialist knowledge is required that isn't available in the council, or where the number of end users is too low to make an in-house solution cost-effective. This route raises a potential that some existing staff may require a 2P transfer and that a staffing review will be needed. This risk has already been factored in and planned for. CareLink staff, including CCTV staff, will receive a 90-day consultation if changes would impact upon them. As a council, we're in the business of ensuring the best possible outcome for our service users. It's clear that the CareLink system no longer delivers the best outcomes for our end users' current needs and will not deliver for their future needs. The delivery model for adult social care is changing as our society changes, with a greater reliance on technology to ensure that people can continue to live independent lives for as long as possible. We must do what we can to deliver the outcomes that people want. A modern monitoring system is key to delivering good outcomes. The decision here is to follow the Eastern Shire's Purchasing Organisation Framework for Technology-Enabled Care Products and Services, ESPO, as part of our normal procurement process, and deliver an up-to-date and flexible alert and monitoring solution to everyone that needs it. I hope you'll all support this. It's not often that we can deliver an improvement in service user experience and cost saving, but this is one of those rare occasions where this is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Very good. Any questions or comments? Nope, can't see any. Can I have a seconder for the recommendations? Thank you, Jenna. All those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you very much. Okay, item 14, which is the Q2 performance management update. So obviously this is for information, and this detail is shared on a regular basis through quarterly performance sessions which exec members have with directors, so that we can drill into the detail, and it does go regularly through our policy and scrutiny panels. I think it's just important to note that we have continued to make progress in a number of areas despite some of the financial and resource challenges that we've talked about earlier in the meeting. But I think it is also important to note that you will see a number of areas going forward where we simply aren't able to make as much progress as quickly as we would like. and that absolutely does come back to the financial and capacity challenges that we've got. The ability to actually drive the ambitious agenda that we've got as a council for our community is, of course, hindered by the funding and the people resources that we've got available. But I really appreciate the work that officers go into in terms of reporting on our key performance indicators and trying to make sure that we hold each other to account to deliver on the priorities of the council. Any questions or comments on anything in the report? Nope. Okay, thank you. So I think we'll take that as noted unless anyone wants to speak up. No? Okay, great, thank you. Item 15 is the draft municipal calendar, so extremely controversial agenda item. We've got recommended draft dates for executive and council meetings for 2025-26. So if there are any anomalies in there that you want to highlight, this is your chance. Nope. Okay, in which case I'm going to assume that we are noting those dates and Democratic Services can carry on with the work of planning those in. Thank you very much, colleagues. Item 16, the forward plan for the 3rd of December. So again, that's for noting unless anyone has got any questions or comments on any items. Nope. Okay, thank you very much. So that's noted. Okay, item 17 is oral updates from exec members. Has anyone got any? Yep, so I've got Councillor Caniford, and then I'll come to Councillor Homaris and Councillor Young.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to take this opportunity to update members about the Wolvers Hill Road Bridge, the motorway crossing. I first of all would like to thank the residents of Banwell, those who have been to speak at Council, the Parish Council, for their input. I have discussed this with my executive members and my council colleagues, and it has been decided that we will not be closing the Wolvers Hill Bridge crossing of the motorway. We will, however, look in the design stage for the new developments in the area so we can create safe roads through the development for residents and allow the current residents who live in Banwell, based on the conversations we were having earlier, that we shouldn't hinder those who live in areas of development to use their chosen routes. This won't require a formal decision, but a formal decision will be made within the Wolvers Hill Master Plan, which will be signed off for me in the new year. So I think it is credit to this council that has listened to those who have shown concerns. We have had a good discussion about the benefits and the disadvantages of the idea of shutting it, but overall it has been decided that it will stay open, and I think colleagues will be pleased to hear that.
Thank you, Mark, and I think that's a very sensible and pragmatic decision, so well done. Jenna, Councillor Homaris.
This is an update on the outcome of the Private Rented Sector Housing Standards Inquiry Day, which was held on 17th of October. So, as I understand, the chair of ASH, which is the Adult Social Care and Housing Policy and Scrutiny Panel, is convening a working group to assess the outcomes and come up with a recommendation to myself, which will be, I think, in January. And I understand that the working group has representation from all parties. Or maybe there isn't a Lib Dem yet.
It's not even a valid working group then on that basis, so we'll sort that out.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. Hannah, Councillor Young.
Thank you. Just two things quickly I wanted to update on. One is since the last council meeting, I've met twice with the commercial director of First Bus to work through options to keep bus fares as low as possible in North Somerset. And I know that WECA have also been meeting with that person with regard to the wider west of England. And our local enhanced partnership, which is the legal partnership between us and WECA and the bus operators, will be making a decision on the local position next week. And secondly, that the bus service improvement plan pause and review process that we instigated in the spring, I know we've been feeding out information about how that's been going over the course of the last few months, but just to update that has now been completed. There have been a series of recommendations which are being actioned and tracked by me and the leader and the deputy leader and chief executive through our internal board. And with regard to the proposed bus priority schemes, there have been quite a number of substantial proposed changes. Several schemes have been taken off the programme. Others have been quite substantially changed as a result of engagement with members and residents. And there are others that are still being worked on with a view to decisions being taken in the coming months. So more information to come on that, but just to let people know that that's happened. Two things from that review that I know were matters of great concern to communities, because I received a lot of feedback about them, was whether motorcycles should be allowed to use bus lanes as a matter of default, and also whether bus lanes should be full or part-time. And those were things that were covered in the revised national guidance, which was guidance note LTN 124 that was produced in March early this year. So there's going to be a policy proposal. There has been some discussion in scrutiny over the summer, which members may well be aware of, but there'll be a policy proposal on those matters coming to a special session of the Council's Transport, Climate and Communities panel on the 7th of January. And that will be open to all councillors who are interested to attend. So I'd strongly encourage anyone who is interested in those things to put that date in your diaries, please. So lastly, just a comment, actually, if I may. I was just mindful of that comment about infrastructure and the need for transport infrastructure and how desperately we need money to do it. And to note that actually the previous government gave North Somerset one of the most significant grants for public transport infrastructure in the country in our bus service improvement plan. And that's not always been popular. So I think it's fair to say that while we might desire infrastructure, we need to desire also the means of putting it in place, which is worth bearing in mind, I think, and something quite close to my heart. I also just wanted to note on that although absolutely we are not complacent and we desperately need better public transport, we have also seen some of the best figures nationally in terms of passengers returning to the buses after COVID in this area, which I think it's really important to note and share. So, you know, although we're not where we want to be, we have great aspirations for our communities, but compared with other areas and other councils, we're actually doing incredibly well in very difficult circumstances, I think, and that's not always a message that's shared by our communities or with our communities. So just that's all I had to say on those points.
Thank you, Hannah. Roger, Councillor Whitfield.
Yeah, I just very briefly wanted to note that that currently I understand that both Southmead Hospital and Western Hospital are having severe capacity issues, both either at or over capacity at pretty much every time of the day and night at the moment. Ambulances stacked outside, people in corridors, and we're not even into the cold weather of the winter yet.
Thank you, Roger. That's an important message, and I think post the pandemic, people have become a little bit, the wrong word is immune, isn't it? But a bit used to constant pressures on our health services. But I think it's really important to keep reminding people that making good decisions about how you access care and support are really important, especially during the winter. Anna Mika, Councillor Waite.
Yes, just two things from me. I just wanted to formally make it known that we've worked with WECA over months and months and months to put together the local nature recovery strategy. And this was formally published about a month ago, and I went to the official launch of the local nature recovery strategy, which was in Bristol, and it was the first one in England, actually, and I think it was quite a coup that we got there before anyone else. So I would really recommend people have a look at the documents that are available and see how that might affect our local areas. It's really worth having a look. And then finally, going about the buses, I know that the little bus in Winford has been mentioned a couple of times this afternoon. I just thought that, yes, I am really, really grateful for that infrastructure money that was brought in via WECA, and that as a result of that, we now have a little minibus that a little minibus that goes around the Winford villages. And I would be really pleased to just note that this morning I came on that little bus to Parsons Street, and there were 10 people on the bus. You know, we started very small on the 1st of September, and people are getting used to the fact that there is a little bus. And I would just really like to, say thank you to everyone who's been involved in funding that, and I hope that it goes from strength to strength. Thank you.
Can I just
go on? I thought you were signalling for the bus, but go on, go for it.
Yeah, obviously, but just to be clear, WECA didn't provide that money. We bid for it with WECA, so it was for North Somerset. I wouldn't want anyone else to get the credit. Thank you.
I know the confusion is that it's called a West Local bus, but yes, you funded it and it had to be applied for via WECA. But yes, we did pay for that, and it's a great little bus, and long may it last.
Okay, I'm going to give you due warning, Catherine, that Mike Solomon is now giving an oral update, so, you know, no pressure. Councillor Solomon.
Knows Mike can't expect.
No, this is I'm sorry, it's very serious. I just hope that the wheels on your little bus went round and round this morning. Sorry.
I haven't got an update and I'm not going to make any silly remarks, so they...
Good, thank you very much. Very positive, I think, positive set of updates there. Thank you, colleagues. The very last item is any urgent business, and there is none. So thank you very much, everyone. And if I don't see you before, which I'm sure I will, but nevertheless, this is our last public executive meeting. You know, have a good Christmas and all that, and we'll see you on the other side if you make it. Thank you.